Welcome to this month's audio. This is Dr. Mike Bucknell, and I want to talk about a topic that I think is just of critical importance to you and your life and your family. And the best way I can define it as your life without chiropractic. I know that sounds like that's a loaded sales pitch statement, but you're going to learn a lot of things today about why, not just why we teach the way that we teach, but why me and my family live the way that we do. And, what a difference that makes in people's lives and what a difference it can make in your life. Why this is so critically important. So we're going to get going with this first and foremost, that it's not about the stats. It's not about the medical stats that you hear on TV. And I mean, I could spend 30 minutes going through all of the different numbers and everything else, trying to prove to you, that medicine is doing what it's doing and it's not working and all this other stuff. But I'm going to save you the trouble because all you have to do is get on Google and do a quick search and you can find all the numbers that are there, So I've kind of moved into a state in my practice and my coaching where if I know you can find an answer on Google or doing an internet search, I'm going to be the first one to tell you, go Google it, instead of just trying to teach every little pointer myself. So if you're interested in the stats, go find the stats. They're there. Everything that I talk about today is covered in those statistics, and it's all self-proclaiming. So what I want to talk to you is the more important factor of philosophy. Okay, Jim Rohn, he's one of the world's greatest, most legendary personal coaches, business mentors, development coaches, motivational speakers. Call it anything you want to. This guy is one of the top notch out there. In fact, he's the one that taught Tony Robbins pretty much everything that he knows. And he has, some interesting, audios, covering the core principles that define your life and the success of your life. And one of those is philosophy. So in terms of what we're talking about today, what is the differing philosophies and what difference does that make in your life? How important is it what your philosophy is? I mean, your philosophy really defines your action. That's the most important thing. How you think, so you are. It's just whatever is going through your brain. If you honestly believe that you're stuck, then there's nothing anybody can do to unstuck you. There's no opportunity for growth the moment that you decide that you are where you are, and all of that comes back to what your philosophy is. So I want to go through the three core philosophies that we see in healthcare and in practice today, and what the problems with those are, what the solutions are for those, what the truth is behind them, and most importantly, what is the outcome if you choose this philosophy for your life. So I want to say with this, what are the typical results? What can you expect are the typical results? So that you don't just rely on the bell curve. We can all look at the bell curve. You've seen any of those charts where basically you've got the bulk of people are in the middle of that curve, but then to the left side, there's the few people that deteriorate down to where they don't get so lucky, and then there's the other end of the curve on the right side where people have gotten real lucky. But what I want you to focus on is all the people in the middle, because likely if you're following a particular model, whatever that model is, you're going to land in the middle of the bell curve. That's what you can bet on. That is where the probability lies. It's not that there's not possibility one way or the other. You could get real lucky or you could also get real unlucky. But the probability is you're going to land right in the middle of the typical results. So that's what we're interested in, is the typical results. Okay, so let's get going with philosophy number one. This is what we call the medical mindset. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the core principles of that mindset and what do those actually mean? What do they mean? How are they defined? And then we're going to dig into those a little bit deeper. So the first core principle is that it's a mechanistic approach. Okay, what that mechanistic approach means is that basically your body is like any other machine. It's like a car or an assembly line or a computer or a refrigerator. In that, it's a collection of moving parts that each provide their own purpose for the system as a whole. Okay, that's probably the best way that we can define that. So here's an example of that. Let's say that you have a patient that's on kidney dialysis. Okay, what that means, what that is, if you're not familiar with it, is a patient that is in kidney failure for whatever reason, whether it's from an injury or it's from things like HIV or any other dysfunction, or really you could even have a patient who gets put on dialysis and their kidneys just stop functioning because they're no longer needed. So we've actually had a case of that. So the example there, if you're on kidney dialysis, then you get put on a transplant list, right? You would get a transplant. Well, here's the problem with that. If the body ran like a car, then you could replace that kidney and it would continue to work absolutely fine from that point forward, right? So you would replace that organ, you would put in a brand new organ, and the rest of the system would not only run the same as it was, but it would actually run better because of that new organ, that new part. The worn out part was replaced. So now the whole car works as a whole. The whole body works better as a whole. It's kind of like, think about if you have a car that the engine goes out on the car, or one of the individual cylinders goes out. Well, you replace that one component of the engine, and now the entire car performs better, right? So here's the problem with that, though. What happens when you have recurring kidney failure? Why is it that when you put an organ, when you replace an organ, now you have to do all of this other stuff to try and keep the body from rejecting that organ? Why is it that you can put a new kidney into a patient and then it's a matter of, sometimes months, sometimes years, but that kidney too eventually fails? And see, the issue with that is that it wasn't really the kidney to start with. It was another factor with the body as a whole, because the body is one unit. But see, there's a second problem to that mechanistic approach. The problem is that typically we don't replace organs. What we do rather is we remove them. So it's not a replacement, it's a removal. And so just literally to look at the body as from and say that it's a mechanistic approach, I don't believe that's even true. That how can, if you had a car and let's say the battery died on the car and you remove the battery, well, how would the car continue to work? Clearly it wouldn't. So the body is no different when you remove any part of the body. For example, if you remove somebody's gallbladder, we can see in the research now that, approximately 5 years down the road, that your cholesterol seems to go through the roof. And that's a consistent state. So, we see that we almost can't even call it mechanistic, but the reality is, just bottom line, it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Because the truth is, your body is one unit. It works as one unit. It's always been one unit. If you change any one part of the whole, then the whole no longer functions the way that it did previously. Okay, so what you need to figure out, the means of dealing with that then is you have to figure out, how do I get the body healthy as a whole? And we have to stop looking at the individual parts all the time as a first case basis. Okay, so except of course in the case of a specific injury. I mean, if you take a knife to the kidney, clearly looking at the whole is not going to apply in that situation. But in most cases, we need to look at the body as a whole first and foremost. We just need to start using a little bit more logic, a little more common sense in our healthcare. So the second thing, the second core principle, only a drug can cure a disease. Okay, now that may sound ridiculous to you, but you've got to realize that is a reality. Why? Because the FDA has made that one of their core principles. The Federal Drug Administration in the United States clearly states that only a drug can cure a disease. So this is not an over-exaggeration by any means whatsoever. That is the core principle standing behind the regulating body for healthcare in America. So what this really means is that you heal from the outside in. That's what that statement says. If you have to take a drug from the outside and put it on the inside in order for you to heal, then that is outside in healing. Okay? I'm going to give you an example. Chemotherapy is the only scientific way to truly heal cancer, right? You know, that if you do anything other than chemotherapy or even radiation therapy, it's the same thing. You know, you're still going outside in to burn out that tumor. That's the only scientifically credible way to truly heal cancer. And if you do anything else, you are a complete nutcase. Okay? So, here's the thing. The problem with that is, does a drug really have the ability to heal? Does a drug really have the ability to create a state of health within the body? And if that were so, doesn't that mean that you could take a drug and you could give it to, let's say that you have a person that had cancer, meaning that they had cancer, their body is chewed up with cancer, but now they're dead. Okay? If that deceased body that is laying there on the ground and they have cancer in their body, and you give that body the chemotherapy or radiation therapy, what happens? Absolutely nothing. Does that person have any ability to heal whatsoever? No. That ability to heal has completely and totally left the body. See, the way that drugs ever even appear to heal is because you're giving those drugs to a functional, alive body that still has the breath of life in it with that innate ability to heal. It's not the drug that is doing it. You know, in cases where, let's say you were in a car accident and you're bleeding profusely, they're going to give you clotting agents. Now, in that case, those drugs may save your life because they stop your body from bleeding profusely. But that doesn't change the idea at all, in that drug is not curing you, it's not healing you. All it's doing is one of two things. A drug can only do one of two things. A drug can either speed up a under-functioning aspect of your body, or it can slow down a over-functioning aspect of your body or your health. Okay? So if you have, let's say, an under-functioning thyroid, you take a drug that stimulates that thyroid to increase in its function. Okay? If you have a fever, for example, you take a drug such as Tylenol to decrease the function of your body that is causing that increased level of heat generation in the body, thereby pulling down the fever. Okay, so that's all a drug can do, is either increase or decrease the speed and action of some component of your body. But never can a drug bring you back to normal, because how does the developer of that drug know what normal is? Is normal the same in one person as opposed to the other? And how does that normal change on a second to second basis? Okay, so when you look at that, I hope you're getting me there. If not, go back and listen to this section again. But the reality is, a drug cannot heal. Healing only comes from the inside out. It has to come from the inside. It is generated. The ability to heal only happens in a healthy, or not in a healthy, but in a living being. It can only happen in a living body because it's that literal life force we call life, we call health, we call innate, that does every healing, every action in the body is generated from that component. So it cannot come from a drug. A drug either stimulates or inhibits. That's it. End of story. Okay? So the next core principle, your body has faulty genetics. Okay? How many of us have heard, an example here, let's say that your father and your grandfather, well, let's look at this a different way. You go into the doctor's office and they do a measurement of your cholesterol, and they come back that your cholesterol is high. The next question, they look at your intake forms and they see that your father and your grandfather have high cholesterol. So what's a connection? Well, they say, well, it's genetic. See, your father and your grandfather both had high cholesterol too. Well, you do. So, hey, coincidence? Nah, that's genetic. It's no coincidence. Well, here's the problem with that. I want you to think about this a little bit a little bit further in detail. If you have high cholesterol, where'd you get it from? Your father or your mother, right? Okay. Well, let's say you got it from your father. Let's say that we're just going to stick to the male side of the family. So where did your father get it from? Clearly from your grandfather, right? Okay. And where did your grandfather get it from? Obviously, your great-grandfather of genetics is correct. Where did your great-grandfather get it from? He got it from your great-great-grandfather. Clearly, that's how genetics work, is they continue to pass down through the generations. Well, if you continue to go up that ladder, one step up, one step up, one step up, one step up, and you just continue to climb through your family tree, you eventually will arrive at Adam, correct? So here's the idea there. The problem with that argument is that it's saying that Adam and Eve had faulty genetics. Okay, so obviously you have to hold some personal clout in the Bible, in order for you to understand that analogy. But that's truth. If that's the case, Adam and Eve had faulty genetics. So either you believe that or you don't believe that. But your belief in that really define. If they have good genetics, then we were created in God's image, as the Bible says. If they had faulty genetics, then that basically makes the rest of the Bible a lie too. So we've really got to think about that and reconsider our idea of the genetics and where it's coming from. Here's problem number 2 that's going to be a little bit more relevant, that even the scientific side, rather than the biblical side, is going to understand. It's a new science called epigenetics. Okay, we've been making incredible advancements. One of the main guys out there, Bruce Lipton, PhD, he's done probably more work than anybody in this field of epigenetics. And what epigenetics means literally is epi means above. Okay, so epigenetics is above the genetics. And what they're defining is that you can literally, your genetics are like switches, that you can either turn genes on or turn genes off, and it depends on what is happening in your life in order for that to be turned on and turned off. So what does that mean? It means that if you are, let's say that you have a high pork fat diet, well, then you can actually turn on genes that cause your body to break down and cause disease. Okay? And on the flip side, if you remove that same component of your lifestyle that's turning on those genes, then you can equally turn off those genes. But it's not just bad genes. You do the same thing with good genes. If you don't exercise at all, then you're going to have certain positive genes turned off. But if you start doing surge training and other forms of high-intensity exercise, you're going to very quickly turn those genes back on to where, for example, you start burning fat, reducing the aging process, et cetera, et cetera. So what this field is really uncovering is that you can completely change, probably 95 to 98% of your genetics just through simple lifestyle changes. I mean, it's when you really start looking into this stuff, it is absolutely fascinating. in that they're even questioning, can you change the hair color of lab rats? That they've actually been able to change the hair color. They've been able to turn cancer on and turn cancer off by feeding mice different diets, et cetera, et cetera. So the reality is, the truth is, your lifestyle defines your genetics. It is not inherited. You're not completely at the whim of genetics with everything that you do. You're not if I can say it, screwed from the start. Okay. Now, are there cases where your kids, will inherit, faulty genes from you that, you see these issues like Down syndrome passed down? Yes, that is true, but I want to make it very clear that is not, there's a difference between a family line and those kind of genetic malformations. Okay, those kind of malformations, that basically you would have to believe that Adam or Eve were that they had the Down syndrome genes when they started, but that's not the case. But it is understandable that at some point down the road that they had been exposed to a chemical or something that has expressed through the process of epigenetics, it has expressed or changed or mutated those genes. But the truth still comes in that you can perform difference in lifestyle changes, that your body eventually, it may take a few generations, but I thoroughly believe that those genetics can be fixed and corrected through positive lifestyle changes. So it's just, here's the point in all of that. Putting it all together is that you can't buy into the philosophy of it's just poor genetics, because what that really comes down to is it's a good excuse not to do anything about it, not to change your health, because you just believe that you're just destined for failure from the first place. So we're going to move on to the next one. The next core principle is that germs cause disease. Okay, an example here. You got the flu from your coworker and you now spread it to your kids, right? How many of us has this happened to or seem to happen to, where we're just spreading around the flu? Well, here's the problem with that. How do you explain daily exposures? The fact that literally every single day you're being exposed by viruses and bacteria. I mean, every time you put your hand on a handrail, you're picking up bacteria. Every time you shake hands, you're picking up bacteria. Scary truth. They did a study and found that some 35% of women and 60% of men in an airport did not wash their hands after using the restroom. And we're talking actually coming out of the stalls. So I know that's fun to think about, but so literally every time you shake hands, you're exchanging bacteria. Every time you exchange money, cash, that's those things just transmit all kinds of bacteria and germs and viruses and everything else. Just anything that is passed from one person to another, you're passing on daily exposures. So how do you explain the fact, if germs cause disease, that you're exposed to these things every single day, yet you only get sick a few times a year? Why is it also, let's look at the second problem to that, is that you can have people sitting around a dinner table and one person can be sick, yet all the other people in the family can be fine. If even though that person has sneezed, they've coughed, you've been around them, you've been in close quarters within 5 feet of them, taking their temperature, et cetera, et cetera. Why do you not get sick? Okay. So the truth is, I hope you see from those examples. Well, actually, I'm going to give you one more example. They did a study where they put people into a confined, an airtight facility where they had cleaned and sterilized and made sure that there were no germs whatsoever in this facility. Now, after they put them in there, they left them in there for some 7 days. I think they left them in there for a week straight, in order to make sure that that none of them came down with anything during that week that they might have carried in. So all of the people stayed healthy during that week. At that point, they introduced somebody that had full-blown flu, okay, and they put them in there with them, and they let them play cards and eat at the same dinner table, and none of the other people got sick. Okay, then they without telling the other people, they took the nasal drippings of the sick person and actually put them on the straws and on their silverware. Disgusting, right? But they wanted to introduce those germs to those people to see if now it would cause disease, that maybe those germs just didn't get transmitted somehow, that somehow they didn't make the jump. Well, still none of those people got sick. So here's the truth behind all of that. If germs cause disease, the human race would no longer exist, plain and simple. That there are so many germs and bacteria and deadly, so-called deadly viruses, going around, that if there was ever in the history of the world a germ or bacteria that was stronger than the human immune system, then we would all be dead, because it would be communicated, it would spread, they would take their opportunity. These are opportunistic organisms. Okay, they would utilize and take hold of that opportunity, and they would have wiped all of us out. Yet that's not the case. Even these severe diseases, they tend to spread a little bit, and then they fizzle out as the immune system catches up and figures out what to do with it again on a population basis. So the reality is you're exposed to these germs every single day. It is not the germs that decide if you get sick or not. It is your body's own integrity if you overcome those germs and if it can fight off those germs or not. Okay, so that germs cause disease thing is definitely by a stretch a half truth. Okay, next core principle: you must rely on education for good health care. Example, I need to bring my child with ear infections to a specialist, because a specialist is needed to really diagnose and see what kind of bacteria it is and fix a problem. Well, how do you explain the savage? How do you explain the person living in the middle of the Amazon jungle, for example? How is it that they can get an ear infection there, even though they don't have medical technology, yet their body somehow manages to fix that problem and they get back to health? These people don't have medical education. They don't have colleges and universities. They don't have qualified physicians. They don't have medical facilities. They don't have federal funding. They don't have any of these things, yet that child still gets well from the ear infection. How do you explain nature? How do you explain the fact that you can have a deer or a squirrel that gets exposed to a particular virus, yet they don't get sick, or an animal gets sick out there in the woods somewhere and they manage to get healthy after that? How do you explain any of that? More importantly and more relevantly, how do you explain a newborn baby? How does a newborn baby stay healthy? Because see, a newborn baby doesn't have any education. They're a newborn baby. They can't talk. They can't see. They're literally coming into the world with zero education. Yet how does their body, as a newborn baby, maintain itself in health, even though they don't have any education whatsoever? And what it comes down to is the simple truth that what B.J. Palmer said: a specialist is somebody who knows more and more about less and less. I love that statement. A specialist is somebody that knows more and more about less and less. And so when we get into philosophy number 2, we're going to define what is more important than education. So core philosophy, core principle the next core principle, it's the dose that makes the poison. Okay, the example: one Tylenol isn't going to hurt me, right? If you get a headache, you can just take a Tylenol. It's not gonna kill you. It's okay. Come on, doc. It's only one Tylenol. Well, here's the problem. Number one, Tylenol is the leading cause of acute liver failure in the United States. Did you know that? Okay. And medications alone are the 4th leading cause of death in the United States. So we don't really have to go very far beyond the statistics to see that there's a big hole, a big flaw in that way of thinking. Okay? Problem number 2 is just simple logic. What happens when you leak just a few thousand barrels of oil a day into the Gulf of Mexico? I mean, if you only do it in one day, no big deal, right? Hey, I mean, it's only a few thousand barrels of oil. But you continue to do that over the next 3 months, and what do you have? That's right, you have a stinking mess. Now, what happens when you go beyond that and you add thousands and thousands of gallons of dispersant that we know absolutely nothing about into the Gulf as well? The truth is poison no matter the dose. It doesn't matter how much it is. When you introduce poison, you don't know what's going to happen. And every single case is different. You can do a study that shows that a drug didn't hurt anybody in that study, but then you put it out on the market and it's going to kill other people that weren't in the study. Why is that? Because poison is poison, no matter the dose. How much poison is enough, or is too much for you to put into your kids, into your children? It's just we've got to start seeing it as poison, though. Tylenol as poison, Advil as poison, aspirin as poison. These things, if you can take a whole bottle and put it down your throat and it's going to kill you, then what lesser degree of that is it doing when you just put one in your mouth? So the next core principle, healthcare is a right. By the way, on that last note, I just want to remind you that at one point in time, mercury was medicine. That they actually gave people spoons full of mercury, and they thought that was medication too. And at that time, they also believed that poison, that it's the dose that makes the poison. So if you give somebody too much mercury, it's going to kill them. But hey, if you only give them the right spoonful, then it's going to be okay. Clearly, we've proven that wrong. Okay, so the next core principle: healthcare is a right. Okay, the example: Obamacare, as a result of too many people sick and unable to afford their own health care. This is the underlying principle in healthcare right now, is that we've got it right. We've got this system right. We've got the technology. We've got the practices. Everything about healthcare is correct, but the problem is we have too many sick people. So since healthcare is a right, now we need to figure out how do we pay for the right healthcare for all of these people who are now sick, out of their control. And I mean, oh my goodness, there's so many holes in that argument. It's ridiculous. But the problem is, if the individual can't afford their own care, then neither can the group of individuals. Because we can't see it as a group, we're still a group, a collection of individuals. So if you take one individual that can't afford their health care, then they can't afford their health care. If you take 100 individuals and now make them a group, but 100 of those individuals can't afford their health care, then you still can't afford the health care. So the truth is this: the only way to improve health care is to remove the cause of the problem in the first place. What is the cause of the problem in the first place? It's exactly all of these flaws that we've just covered with this medical mindset. Until you fix the problem, you can't just move the cost of healthcare around to somebody else and have it work out. All we're doing is finding new ways to transfer wealth to certain groups, i.e. doctors, drug companies, and those in power. I mean, that's all it's really doing, but it's in no way, shape, or form helping that individual get healthy as a result. It's just transferring the responsibility for the payment to somebody else. Just one more way to dig into our pockets, So it's not that I'm against Obama or Obamacare or anything like that. It's plain and simple. It doesn't address the cause. I mean, I can't make a statement on the side of Republican or Democrat. The fact is, it just doesn't affect the cause. So until you remove the cause of the problem, I don't care if it's Republicans coming up with the idea or Democrats coming up with the idea still sucks. Okay? So here's some questions about these core philosophies. Number one, what happens if you continue to live in this manner? What happens if you just continue to abide by these core sets of principles? Okay? Are you going to be sicker? Are you going to be healthier? Are you going to be more prosperous? Are you going to be less prosperous? You just answer it for yourself. What happens if you continue to live in this manner? Okay. Will you be healthy as you retire if you continue to live under these ideas? Okay. What are the probabilities here? Okay. Think about the bell curve. The reality is only 1 in 1,000 people at the age of retirement are retiring healthy. So that also goes hand in hand with that. The next question, will you be able to afford your health care under this model? Not too many people can afford health care. Otherwise, we wouldn't have Obamacare. Okay? But answer again that for yourself. Will you personally be able to afford your health care if you just continue to take more and more medications and get more and more organs removed as your body fails itself? Okay? What is the future for your children under this model? Does a future look too bright for our kids 20, 30, 50, 100 years from now if we just continue down this pathway and trying to seek out new ways to pay for health care we can't afford? Okay? What is the future of our nation under this model? If we continue to spend money recklessly that, for a unsustainable model of health care, then what does that ultimately do to the health and prosperity of our nation 100, 200, 300 years down the road? Okay? So in what positive way, the last and I believe the most important question of all, in what positive way does this overall way of thinking improve your character and the person that you are? If you believe that, let's just review through these, that your body is just a collection of parts that are just kind of glued together to try and keep everything functional, but those parts are probably going to break, that you have to rely on a drug in order to cure your disease once they do break, and your body has faulty genetics that you probably have nothing to do with, and if you happen to get the wrong germs, you're done for, you're out of luck. And you'd better rely on somebody else more educated than you, because you really don't have a clue what you're talking about or even have a prayer of knowing what you're talking about. And you better know what the right dosage is. Those doctors better get it right, because if they give you the right dose, if they give you the wrong dose, too much or too little a dose, you're not going to get healthy. Too much of a dose, you're going to die. And, ultimately, you're going to have to pay for everybody else's health care too. In what positive way does that overall way of thinking improve your character and who you are as a person? So I hope you're starting to see it more from my point of view here. So let's go into philosophy number 2. Philosophy number 2 is what we call straight chiropractic. This is the new straight. And what I mean by straight chiropractic, back in the day, straight chiropractic, before all the new ways of thinking that we have now, straight chiropractic literally meant you got adjusted alone, and no vitamins, no exercise, none of that other stuff really had anything to do. But luckily we do know better on those levels now. But let's look at that a little bit closer. The philosophy, the core philosophy is there. Number 1 is the holistic approach. Okay, in that your body is one unit, one body, one health, and you have to be healthy as a whole, not as the individual parts. Okay, so let's look at the example of the dialysis patient. With the dialysis patient, we see that body is not healthy. So what we do, number 1, is we treat the person's nerve system to get their body functional from what causes function in the first place, the inside out, that nerve system. Number 2, we start supporting their body with quality nutrients to build the tissues of the body, understanding that if those kidneys are malfunctional, they're probably not built the way that they should be. So you start giving the body quality nutrients in order to rebuild itself inside out. You start, applying physical fitness to get movement back into the body, to start stimulating function through the use of motion. You start detoxifying the body to remove any chemical interference that's in that body. And lastly, you support that person in the right thought process to attain a proactive nature in their healthcare, to where they start acting in a sense of creating health within the body. And whether they do or whether they don't, they're now going to have the best ability to heal and function as possible. There are functional limits of matter, but when you act in such a way, you're best suited to be able to get well. And I personally believe, as long as you're alive, as long as you have a breath in your body, that brain and nerve system still has the ability to heal. Otherwise, the rest of your body would already be dead. It would already be shut down. So the second core principle is the body heals above, down, inside out, not outside in, okay? Which means all health, healing, and function comes from the nerve system in the brain, flows down across the nerve system, the spinal cord, and those nerve pathways to the organs in order to sustain them and function. So with a cancer patient, for example, you're going to first and foremost realize that cancer patient's body is not functional. If they're diseased, then that's got to be coming from above, down, inside out first. That there must be an interference in that nerve system that has now not allowed that patient to maintain themselves in a state of function. So until you address that state of function and you get that patient's nerve system clear, it doesn't matter what else you do, they're not going to get well. But if they're also toxically burdened or under nutrition, their body is nutrition deficient, then they're also not going to have the ability to rebuild their body correctly. So you've got to support the body again through all 5 essentials in order to get that person healthy. Okay, the third core principle, your lifestyle defines your genetic expression. This is epigenetics through and through. I mentioned Bruce Lipton earlier. It's interesting to note that Bruce Lipton was not a chiropractic patient. He was not even searching out chiropractic. He was a genetic researcher. But in his research through epigenetics and how it worked, that led him to start asking the questions, well, if that's the case, what is the best way to get healthy? What is the best modality available today to get a sick person well? And it led him straight to chiropractic. And so a lot of his teaching now is showing how chiropractic solves the health picture from above, down, inside out through affecting epigenetics and the way that the genes express themselves in a healthy, functional body. So your lifestyle defines your genetic expression. Think about a heart disease obese patient. You can't just give somebody a heart bypass surgery but let them continue or gastric bypass, yet you just continue the same lifestyle that got you into that situation in the first place. You've got to change your lifestyle. If you change that person's lifestyle and you now alter their diet, you alter their exercise habits and everything else, the other 5 essentials, then you can start to see the cholesterol and the blood pressure, and you can see them start to decrease their weight. You can see all these problems start to go in the opposite direction. So, clearly that the lifestyle is having an effect, and it's not just genetic expression that is the whole picture there. Okay, the next core principle, subluxation causes disease. Okay, it's not the outside in, it's not the germs, it's not the bacteria, it's not genetics. It's the fact that let's look at somebody that got the flu. The example would be that person's body is somehow out of sync. That they have subluxation in their nerve system, not allowing their body to keep their immune system functioning at 100%. As that immune system now malfunctions at less than 100%, now your body is more susceptible to influence. So now one of those opportunistic organisms takes hold within your body and it starts to replicate, and the immune system, because it's decreased in its function, cannot address that bacteria or virus fast enough to be able to stop its replication. Therefore, you start to experience the symptoms of sickness. Okay, and it's when the body when the body finally stimulates itself to a functional degree where it can overcome that flu, bacteria, whatever it is. Now you start to see the symptoms go in the opposite direction. But ultimately, it still comes down to the body has to increase immune function in order for it to get well. And where does that immune function first and foremost come from? The ability for the nerve system to control that immune system, just like every other function within the body. Okay, so the bottom line is the first thing that you should look at with disease is nerve system interference, or what we call subluxation. Okay, The next core principle is innate before education, okay? And I want to go back to the example of the little newborn baby right from the beginning. You know that a newborn baby is born with literally zero education, yet they still maintain themselves in existence and in health. How is that possible? And the way that that is possible is because you have what's called an innate intelligence that is 100% right from the day that you were born. That power in the brain, whatever it is, however we can or cannot define it, that power, the above, down, inside out principle in the body, knows exactly how to keep that heart beating, knows exactly how to keep that liver functioning, how to keep the kidneys filtering urine, how to make the stomach digest mother's milk. It knows exactly what to do with every single one of these components in perfect order right from the day that you're born. Wrap your mind around that and just think about that for a minute. That is completely devoid of any kind of education that is now learned as we get older. And it knows exactly what to do 100% from birth to death, from cradle to grave. So how is it, the example there and showing the power behind that is how one simple adjustment can cure somebody of migraines. Somebody can have migraine headaches on a regular basis, yet one adjustment moves the atlas, gets the pressure off the nerve system, above, down, inside out, letting that brain flow its information from the brain down the spinal cord, out the nerves, to the organs. And this moment that you remove that pressure, those migraines no longer occur. Okay, that is just one simple testament to the power of innate intelligence. But you spend one day in my clinic. You spend one day standing up front talking to patients come in one after another, and you just ask every single one of them, what has chiropractic done for you? You're going to see an underlying theme. There is no way that we would see the results that we do in our clinic if it weren't for the power and the truth behind innate intelligence and the fact that you have an inborn innate intelligence keeping your body and sustaining it in function. Okay? Call that innate intelligence what you want. Call it the Holy Spirit. Call it whatever you want to. But we know scientifically that it exists, that it must exist, or else we would not see the truth. We would not see the repeatable, the consistent effects that we do because of it. Okay? The next core principle, poison is poison. I covered that before, but I want to use a specific example here, mercury from vaccinations. The reality is mercury is not safe in any dosage. Every single time that you put mercury into the body, it causes damage, neurological damage. You can get right on YouTube and look up University of Calgary mercury study, and you see that it doesn't matter the dose. Mercury is mercury, poison is poison. So every time that you vaccinate your children, you are causing neurological damage. It does not matter the dosage. Yet a lot of doctors will say, well, it's just a small amount. Look up a video called Quecksilver on YouTube, and you will find that mercury is not safe in any level. So, that's just one example, but the reality is every time you put a Tylenol, a acid reflux medication, a cholesterol medication, a blood pressure medication, any of these drugs into your body, you are creating chemical subluxation, not allowing the body to adapt in the way that it needs to in order to get you well and keep you functional. You always have to look for the cause, not just cover it up with poison. Okay? The next core philosophy, core principle, healthcare is a responsibility. I want to give an example. We have this family that when they started care, they went through their entire year of care. And I remember when they came up to me in a parking lot at Walmart and they said, Dr. Mike, we just want to let you know, we just got done with our taxes. And for the first time in our lives, we noticed that we spent nothing on healthcare with the exception of what we spent in your office. So it cut our health expense. Literally, we had no healthcare deductions this year, and it put a lot of money back into our pockets. And that's just one example of when you keep your body healthy as an individual, you take the time to do what's necessary as an individual, then all of a sudden you can afford your care for yourself. And then we don't need Obama or anybody else to bail us out as a result. So if you teach and you live the 5 essentials in your own life, and you teach it to everybody that you know, then all of a sudden you're not going to need anything else, anybody else to cover your health care for you. It is affordable, it is attainable on your own, and now you can just do, like we do, a catastrophic policy to where if I get hit by a bus, I'm going to be covered for that, and that health care is incredibly cheap. Our personal premiums, for a family of 4 is about $120 a month. So yes, that's correct. $120 a month for a high deductible catastrophic policy. Outside of that, we don't need health care. I don't need drug coverage. I don't need hospital benefits. I don't need physician benefits and all this other stuff because I don't use it. I keep my body healthy from above down, inside out, and take good care of myself. Personal responsibility, that's the key. Okay, next core principle, emergencies require emergency care. I want to make it very clear to you that I am not a kook, who thinks that, I never need health care of any kind whatsoever. The fact is, if you're in a car accident, if you have a heart attack, anything else like that, yes, you are going to require emergency care. And that is where healthcare in America shines, is in emergency medicine. If we could keep it at that, we would be doing good. But the problem is, it's not just emergency medicine, it's intervening in every kind of healthcare we can imagine. So the truth here, save the life, then change it so it doesn't repeat itself. Okay? I want to repeat that again. If it comes down to an emergency and some kind of healthcare catastrophe, whether it's a heart attack or a car accident, whatever, save the person's life, but then change it so it doesn't repeat. Okay? Now, I want to make a delineation there with such as cancer, though. I mean, if your life is not in immediate danger, whether it is or not, doing chemotherapy and radiation therapy is not the right way to go about it, because the statistics do not show it. There's a great movie called Cancer from the Inside Out. If you are in any doubt of what I just said, you need to see that movie and see the facts for yourself. So, going through the questions again on this note, what happens if you continue to live in the above manner? If you start treating your body and your health in that manner, and you live by those principles, that your body heals itself from above down, inside out, that you need to support that healing through the expression of your lifestyle, and that it is your responsibility to do so, what happens if you continue to live in that manner? Okay? Will you be healthy as you retire? What are the chances that you're going to be healthier as you retire? Will you be able to afford your health care under this model? What does that extra savings in healthcare accumulate to over the course of the years? What is the future, therefore, of your children under this model? By not feeding them medications and getting their organs cut out as they get older. What is the future of our nation under this model? If we're seeing our population get healthy under a sane and sustainable model, what does that do to the future and sustainability of our nation as a whole? And in what positive way does this overall way of thinking that your body is built well, from above down, inside out, that you've got every power that you require in yourself to do anything and everything that you need to do to have a healthy and successful life, what does that do to your overall way of thinking and improve your character? It's somebody can have the philosophy, let's say that somebody has terminal cancer. And when I say terminal, I'm saying terminal cancer to the point of no return. Okay? And there is that point. I agree, there is that point. My mother-in-law, unfortunately, she hit that point. And we lost her to cancer. But what does that do to your character here, now, and later? And if you hold to the fact that, I'm going to stick to a higher calling. I'm going to stick to a higher principle. How does that affect your thinking and the way that your ability to affect others? Just think about the positive way that the ways that those affect you. So now, now that we're done with that one, I do want to cover the last and final philosophy, and this is what we call philosophy number 3, the modern day mixer. Okay, back in the old school days of chiropractic, a mixer was somebody that didn't just do chiropractic, but included nutrition and and exercise and stuff like that as being important to your health. It's kind of funny how when you look at the flaws in that way of thinking, and you start to see it from a better all around understanding that. Those things do have an effect, so this is not that kind of mixing. This is what we call the modern day mixer, where here's the idea. The underlying principles are function for wellness, but medicine for disease. Okay, that if, as long as you're healthy, then yeah, you should do chiropractic, you should do massage, you could do all that other stuff. But once your body is broken, it's broken, and you need medicine to bail you out. Okay, well, here's the problem with that. There's 2 problems with that. Number 1, if the body heals inside out in health, then why can't it heal inside out in disease? Okay, let me repeat that. If the body heals inside out in health, then why can't it heal inside out in disease? Why all of a sudden do we need outside in once we get diseased? Okay, problem number 2. If the body cannot be made healthier with drugs and surgery in health, like if you can't take a bottle of Tylenol a month, or go in and get your left kidney removed and make you healthier while you're healthy, then how can it do so in disease? Okay, let me repeat that again. If the body cannot be made healthier by adding drugs or removing organs in health, then how can it do so in disease? Okay, literally the idea there is that God didn't make our bodies perfect to start with, and now we, through our education, need to make it perfect, that we can do better than God did initially. That's the underlying idea there. Okay, so there's a big flaw in that belief system that function for wellness, but I need medicine when I'm diseased. Okay, number 2 core philosophy. Though I do all I can to stay healthy, I still need wellness checks with a qualified medical provider. Okay, the example there is going in for routine mammograms, bone density testings, colonoscopies, taking your kid's temperature, getting your cholesterol checked. I mean, you can think of a lot of different examples here. Well, here's the problem. First and foremost, especially in the case of like mammograms, what damage do these tests do in themselves? You see, these violate principles of health and healing. Those 5 essentials of health and healing, they actually violate those principles, in that radiation causes massive amount of damage in itself. So you're looking for something that maybe not even there, but in doing so, you're actually causing damage. Does that make a lot of sense? Problem number 2, what will I do if they say I find something, that they find something? Am I going to fall back on drugs at that point? Am I going to go under chemotherapy? Am I going to go and get my colon removed? What will I do if they say that they find something? So here's the truth. If you're concerned enough to test for it, shouldn't you be concerned enough not to be lazy? Okay? What I'm saying there is if you're concerned enough to test for it, then why not just go ahead and act in a way that would get you healthy if you had it in the first place? Another way of saying that is live your life as if you had cancer. Live your life as if you had terminal cancer or terminal heart disease. Stay as healthy as possible and leave it at that. That way you don't need to be concerned. You're not going to have any reason to go and get a mammogram. Well, I mean, my wife doesn't get mammograms. She's not going to be getting mammograms. She does everything necessary to keep her body healthy so that she doesn't have to worry about it. And if she's concerned at all about it, then she can do self-breast checks, not go in to get blasted by the same radiation you would use standing outside of a nuclear blast or the equivalent of 1,000 chest x-rays. That's what you get with one mammogram, So just act accordingly and do the things that keep your body healthy, and then you don't need to be freaked out and concerned to go and get all these supposed wellness checks. Okay. By the way, Obamacare is going to be including a lot of these so-called wellness checks in what we're paying for every single person in America. That's why I'm addressing that one specifically. Okay. The next core philosophy: subluxation isn't the only cause of disease. Okay. Example: I should still get my kids vaccinated or have their tonsils removed. That it can't be just a simple interference that would let those kids get sick from polio or pertussis or something like that, I should still go ahead and get my kids protected against whooping cough. Well, the truth, think about it. I want to give you a story, real quick story. There was a doctor, a chiropractor, an old school chiropractor, and he had a lake house. And there was a medical provider that lived right next to him. So one day they're down standing by the lake talking, and their kids are out swimming together. And the medical doctor turns to the chiropractor and says, by the way, this is a true story, says to the chiropractor, well, we went and we got our kids' tonsils removed last week. And the chiropractor looked at him like, what? Why did you do that? He said, well, they don't really need them, so we just went ahead and we had them removed for prevention. And the chiropractor, without missing a beat, turned to the medical provider and said, well, did you go ahead and remove their assholes too to prevent hemorrhoids? So the point of the moral of the story there is, let the body do its thing. If a step forward is a step forward, but a step back is a step back, the more that you try to interfere with health, the worse off you're going to be every single time. The body needs no help, just no interference. Okay, remove the interference and let the body have what it needs to have to function, and it's going to maintain itself. Okay. Now, the last core philosophy, I'm not sure about this innate thing. How can centuries of medical technology be wrong? Well, the truth is real simple here. Look at the numbers, look at the results. We talked about stats in the beginning. This is where you go and you start looking at those stats. It looks good, but does it work? It looks fancy. They've got the fancy buildings. They've got the fancy equipment. They've got the technology that you can't understand or even pronounce. They've got the drugs that are backed by billions of dollars. But does it work? Our healthcare in America is the worst system in the world. We are number one in the world in chronic disease, death, and illness. How can that be working? So, while most of people, I think, let me go through this first. Let me go through this first. What happens if you continue to live in this manner? Okay, if you continue to live by those set of principles, will you be healthy as you retire? Will you be able to afford your care under this model? What is the future for your children under this model? What is the future of our nation under this model? And in what positive way does this overall way of thinking that you can have one foot in the boat and one foot on the shore improve your overall character? The reality is this modern day mixture, this philosophy number 3 really doesn't exist. The reality is that this model is pretty much the medical model way of thinking. Okay? The reality is that 95% of people live in the medical model. 4.9% or so probably live in this mixer category. There's probably only about a fraction of a percent, 0.1% of people live in the principle, in that second philosophy. So here's my question for you. Which of these 3 lifestyles seem the most logical and the most rational? Which one of them seem to be the most really scientific? That's the funny part. Okay, what are you doing right now to stake your claim and to change your lifestyle to match up to the right philosophies? Do you have the guts to stick to your decision? Or are you going to bail the second you get sick and go back to the drugs, go back to surgery and cutting organs out? How is your attention span? This is the biggest one. How is your attention span? I see that most people's attention span is so short that they can't stick to something that's non-mainstream for more than 6 months to a year. It's a very rare individual who can actually stick to something non-mainstream for sustained periods of time. But that really tells you how well you get the principle, how well you get it, is your ability to keep attention and stick to it when everybody else is lost. Okay? And have you been tested yet? Because if you haven't been tested, I mean, have you been challenged? Have you had a health challenge that is determined, are you going to go this way or are you going to go that way? Are you a mixer or are you principled? Because it's going to come. Those challenges are going to come because ultimately, even chiropractic is a losing battle because ultimately every single one of us are going to die from something. So that's the funny part. Even when you're principled, you're still going to die from something. So it's a losing battle. But the challenge is not in that. It's what kind of character do you maintain? What kind of principles do you maintain? Do you trust in God or do you trust in education? Do you trust in innate or do you trust in education? That's really the question here. So I want to leave you with this. Like I said, a fraction of people actually live and maintain themselves in the principle. With those kind of numbers, you've got to realize you are the lucky ones. If you're listening to this right now, if you listen to this audio, you are the lucky one because you got exposed, because you at least have the ability to choose which way you're going to go or not. But what chance does your neighbor have? What chance does your coworker have? What chance does your family have? The only chance that they have is you. It's you giving them this CD. It's you passing it on. It's you inviting them to a dinner. It's you talking to them about their drugs they're taking. It's you talking to them about their kids getting vaccinated. You know, I have a patient who thanked me this last week because they met another family at their work who they've known for the last 4 years, and they don't vaccinate their kids. Yet they have a 1-year-old child now that their little girl just passed a year old, and they had chosen not to vaccinate because we had talked to them, we had educated them. Yet they've known this other family for 4 years. And that family never said anything to them at all about vaccinating their children or not, or the fact that they didn't vaccinate. They never said a word. You know, so he called me and he thanked me for having the guts to educate people and tell them the truth about how their body stays healthy because, unfortunately, this other family didn't have the guts. So I want to leave you with this. This is Matthew 7:15 through 20. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will recognize them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes, or figs from thistles? So every healthy tree bears good fruit, but the diseased tree bears bad fruit. Fruit, guys. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus you will recognize them by their fruit. In short, guys, look at the numbers. Look at the reality around you. Medicine and the medical model and that first philosophy prevails in our world today. Look at the fruit. The numbers don't lie. A healthy tree does not bear bad fruit. Therefore, the health of the tree is not there. The tree is sick. The medical model is sick. Healthcare in our world today is sick, and it must be cut down and replaced by something sane that's bearing good fruit. As I said, spend a day in our office, talk to our patients, and see the good fruit. I want to thank you guys for listening, and I'm begging you, pass a CD on to somebody, bring somebody to a dinner, get them involved, get them educated, lead them towards a better way of health and healing. Thanks for listening.